My name is Cassandra, and this is my first true crime video on my channel, Not Before Bedtime. Welcome everyone. So, I've chosen this case as it was one that has always fascinated me. It features a mother and daughter living a fairly reclusive life in one of the most remote corners of eastern England. Constance, who was widowed, and her daughter Janice lived in a detached house down an isolated farm track. Janice was a whippet breeder, and this was her whole life. She was determined to breed the perfect example of the whippet and to show it at the famous British dog show Crufts. At the time of her death, she had around 27 dogs and would often be seen walking them among the bleak fens surrounding her house. She lived in the village of Upwell, a small village on the Norfolk-Cambridge border, which, although lovely and welcoming in summer, is anything but in winter. Then it becomes an eerie, bleak place for only the hardiest of souls. For some, its bleak isolation is its appeal. For others, it's very much a place to avoid. For Connie and Janice, this was very much its appeal, but it was probably a contributing factor to what was to befall them. For sometime in January 1999, both these women were murdered in their own homes. Janice had a part-time job working for a local man by the name of John Bromley. He owned a greyhound kennels and she would help walk them. When, on one icy morning in early January, she failed to turn up to work, John's wife Sylvia, knowing how reliable Janice was, went to her house to investigate. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. Thinking she might be ill, she left. But after 3 or 4 hours, and there was still no sign from her, she went round to the house again. This time she peered through the windows and could see lots of distressed dogs and a lot of dog mess on the carpet. This obviously alerted her to the fact that something was very, very wrong indeed, and so she called the police. It took them around 20 minutes to arrive, and when Sylvia inquired about Connie and Janice, the policeman was noticeably ashen-faced and replied that he couldn't tell her any more. That's when she knew her suspicions were correct. Both women were dead. Sylvia was to learn that both women had been stabbed a number of times. Connie was found lying on the sofa with 10 stab wounds, and Janice was found lying on her back with her feet taped together. She had 11 stab wounds, one of which was in her back. There was no sign of forced entry, which led to the police believing that the killer was known to both of the women, and the fact that Janice had 1 stab wound in her back was probably due to the killer having taken her by surprise. She would have been a very fit woman, she was only 45, and so this seems the most likely explanation. Although John and Sylvia were initially questioned about the women's murders, given that they employed Janice to walk their dogs, they were quickly cleared, but not without having to endure unpleasant village speculation in the early months of the investigation. As Connie and Janice were practically hermits, the police must have had very little to go on in terms of people to question, and it was a similar situation with the actual crime scene, although the police did find a partial thumbprint on the hearth and a boot print. Swabs were taken from the women's bodies and DNA was present in one of the wounds in Janice's chest. But it was to be a number plate that was to lead the police to their most credible suspect to date. A farmer who owned a field near the woman's house spotted a car parked there one weekend. This was so unusual, he jotted down the car's number plate and gave it to the police. Unfortunately, this wasn't fruitful, but the sequence of numbers and letters had stuck in the mind of one of the detectives, and one night, when he was driving along a local road, he glanced at a car on the other side of the road and immediately noticed a similar registration number. When he got into work the next day, he played around with the sequence, entering variations into the national database. And up popped Kevin Cotterill. On further investigation, a link was made between Cotterill and the Sheridans. 7 months ago, this 33-year-old double glazing salesman or door-to-door salesman had sold them some double glazing. Now they were able to match the DNA to him as well. The DNA, if you remember, that was found in the wound on Janice's chest. And they were also able to match the boot print to him as well. When they searched his house, they found a blood-stained bag, and on forensic examination, they found that the blood matched Janice and Connie's. They had their man. Kevin Cottrell was a 33-year-old door-to-door salesman living at home with his father in the village of Pentney, Norfolk. He had a previous conviction for burglary, which involved an indecent act when he was 17, where he had broken into a local family's home, aware that they would be on holiday. I've read reports that he was particularly obsessed with the girl that lived in this house. He had a series of jobs which gave him the ideal opportunity to scout for victims, and of course when he came upon the Sheridans, he must have thought they presented as the perfect victims due to their location and the fact that they were two women living on their own. The case was due to go to court, but on the morning of the trial, Cottrell had a word with his barrister and changed his plea to guilty, denying the women's family any satisfactory answers as to what the motive was. He was given 2 life sentences. Detective Inspector Paul Chapman, who led the investigation, said, "He is clearly wicked and evil beyond belief." What I think is one of the most interesting aspects of this case is that it's very rare for someone to progress from burglary to murder, and a double murder at that. The police did try to establish if he could be linked to any other crimes in the area, but so far they haven't been successful. So that brings us to the end of this Not Before Bedtime case. Please do leave any comments down below. I would be really interested to know your thoughts. And please do like the video if you enjoyed it and consider subscribing to my channel. I have lots more ideas for further videos, but if you would like me to feature a case, let me know below. See you next time. Bye bye.